Arlington County recently approved a 40-year plan for Crystal City. The county board, working with the community, developed a new vision at an important turning point for this vitally important neighborhood.
Arlington County recently approved a 40-year plan for Crystal City. The county board, working with the community, developed a new vision at a turning point for this vitally important neighborhood.
Why is it important to plan for the future of Crystal City?
Well, part of it has to do with the 2005 decision at the federal level of what was called BRAC, which is the Base Realignment and Closure process, that basically said 18,000 jobs that are in all these buildings around us are going to go away. And so there was an immediate impact on the real estate for the owners of it, but also on the county because, employment, tax revenue, and all that.
Right.
So we had to figure, what are we going to do now, just as the private owners had to think, what are we going to do now? But it's also an opportunity to correct some of the mistakes.
Yeah.
And as we've just seen walking up this street, this is not necessarily the street environment we want. The Arlington vision of a pedestrian-friendly urban environment is not what we have in every block of Crystal City.
No, it's a little intimidating.
It is, and we're in the daylight here. Can you imagine when the sun starts to go down, you really don't want to be on this street. And
Right.
The irony is, that's the metro station across the street from us. This should be the epicenter. This is where we want people to be, where we want people to want to be.
So Chris, how do you transform a neighborhood that is almost completely developed?
Well, that is the challenge here. And so that means, to some degree, you need greater density because that's part of what's going to create the incentive for those who will invest in these new Class A spaces that we're talking about and the kind of amenities that will make it a great downtown. So, the plan that we've approved does, in fact, involve a significant increase in density to make that possible, to make that viable.
The prospect of bigger, taller buildings in Crystal City worries some residents. Seeking to address their concerns, the board created a special council composed of local residents and other stakeholders to monitor how the plan unfolds and to protect residents' interests. Krister Ahl, a longtime resident, chairs the Crystal City Citizens Review Council.
First, to make sure that some of the things we have already talked about will be followed through on, to not fall for the temptation of bending over backwards to just bring in the money and serving the interest of developers, but to really follow through on the requirements and the constraints within the plan.
So they're involved right now in planning for the implementation, the monitoring, to see how it is we actually will realize the ideals that we put into the plan.
With any change that entails much higher density, I think it's natural that people think immediately of the traffic impact.
What we've learned from our experience, particularly with the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, is you can have a tremendous increase in density. You don't necessarily get a corresponding increase in traffic.
For the traffic assumptions to be believable, there has to be something serious to the idea of changing people's mindsets and also making it possible for them to use other means than sitting each one in their individual cars in driving in and out. I mean, everything from walking and biking to carpooling and, of course, public transit in different forms.
And that's why we've planned for the Crystal City streetcar, a light rail project that will run right through these streets and will connect the metro station, the VRE station, other metro stations like Pentagon City and out Columbia Pike all the way to the county line and to Skyline and perhaps beyond there.
What kind of time frame are we looking at before we see an actual functioning streetcar in Crystal City?
We're talking about in the first decade of this having the system in place long before most of these buildings actually get redeveloped.
Both the county and residents are determined that increased density not mean a decrease in open space.
New density, increased density, obviously by definition competes with open space, and that I will make sure that whenever there is space, open space removed, built on, that there will not be any lags in getting it replaced.
Part of the plan is we may have some higher buildings, but we want some better quality open space. Places like this can be enhanced. So you've got a nice balance between the density, the private spaces mostly, and the public spaces, the streets, the parks, the sidewalks.
You can already see this new Crystal City beginning to emerge.
So Chris, in some ways, the transformation of Crystal City is already getting underway, isn't it?
Yeah, and where we're walking right here, of course, is a good example of it. As you can see, an active street with, outdoor seating, and people will come out and eat lunch, and people of all ages come through here. This wasn't here 10 years ago. This was a one-way street. It was basically full of cars, and not very many people would have wanted to walk next to it. You didn't have the parking lot, you didn't have the wide sidewalk. You wouldn't really want to be pushing a stroller and minding a small child. But this was transformed over the last several years by making the street two ways, something done in conjunction with the county, and we have the beginning of a lively urban environment. So this is kind of the first taste of what things can be with new investment and a plan that is based on good urban design.
As redevelopment gains momentum, a top priority will be preserving and expanding the supply of affordable housing.
When we were planning this place, we said, we're starting at the front end, we know where this is going. We know this will be valuable in the future. Oil prices get higher, energy costs get higher over time, people want to be closer in, demographics are driving more of this. So, it will be desirable. How do we ensure that there are places for people who aren't high income to live in a place here? So the Crystal City sector plan, more than any plan ever done before in Arlington, incorporates goals for affordable housing and some of the means to get them there. And that also is part of what the Citizen Review Council will be checking up on and watching as time goes on.
My focus during this work has been really on a vision that extrapolates beyond today's situation and try to figure out what would make for an attractive working and living environment in Crystal City for the next generation and to come.
To learn more about how residents will continue to monitor the Crystal City Plan and view the plans themselves, visit the county website at arlingtonva.us.